All right, if you're just joining us here, we got some breaking news on CBS Sports HQ. Our NFL insiders have been hard at work, been able to deliver with us the information we've been waiting for with Deshaun Watson, where retired Judge Sue Robinson suggesting here that Deshaun Watson did violate the league's personal conduct policy and is suggesting the 6-game variety here. The NFLPA has said it will not appeal. The NFL, in terms of the league, going to have a few days to do that. So let's go ahead and bring in insider Jonathan Jones to deliver that. JJ, what more can you tell us about the latest with Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, it is 6 games for Deshaun Watson from retired federal judge Sue L. Robinson. Of course, she heard both sides, really all sides. It was Deshaun Watson and his legal team, Rusty Hardin. It was the NFLPA there to make sure that Deshaun Watson's due process rights, as laid out in the collective bargaining agreement, were followed. And then, of course, the NFL. Deshaun Watson and his legal team were pushing for 0 games, no suspension, no fine. The NFL was pushing for a suspension of at least 1 year, an indefinite suspension of at least 1 year. What that would mean is the league wanted him to be suspended not just for this year, but would then have to apply for reinstatement until or before he could return in 2023. But of course, as we now know, Judge Robinson has decided that it will be 6 games. I'm told that he will not face any fine. He will lose the game checks from those 6 games. You can do the quick math, and nearly a third of his $1 million or so base salary, so a little more than $300,000 he would lose out on. Of course, Tommy, we know that the Cleveland Browns structured the contract with Deshaun Watson with this potential inevitability where the suspension could happen and that it would lessen his financial hit. But in many people's eyes, this is just the next step. This is not necessarily the final step. Deshaun Watson and the NFLPA have said that they will not appeal. The NFL has 3 days to appeal it, and it would go to Roger Goodell or someone that Roger Goodell decides to appoint on whether this suspension is upheld or whether the NFL imposes whatever suspension it wants to.
All right, so there's a few things to unpack here, but you laid that out nicely. And to your point, the $1 million salary structure for now, if you looked at the total $230 that he's supposed to make, it's well under 1% of what he could lose here from those 6 game checks at $330K per game. You talked about the league here, given the opportunity to have this window. What's your understanding of whether they will then take that option to appeal or not?
That is really the big question that everyone wants to know. It's something that the NFL has not shown their hand in talking with sources on multiple sides of this yesterday. There was the belief that this would not be a year-long suspension. There's also the belief that it wouldn't be no suspension, that it would not be 0 games. And so talking with one source just moments before the news dropped told me, I think it's going to be about 6 games. And of course, it came out that way. That's the way that it was trending, where it would be about half of a season if you asked people to project it yesterday, as I did. So what will the NFL do? Will they be, are they swayed by what the NFLPA and Deshaun Watson put out in a statement yesterday about we will not appeal and we call on the NFL to respect this process? You know, this is the first time, Tommy, that we've seen a suspension under this new CBA and sort of how this is playing out. Before, it was Roger Goodell as judge, jury, and executioner. Well, now what you have is an arbitrator who is the judge on the front end, but then Roger Goodell now has the opportunity to operate as an appeals court. And so will the NFL take it up? Is this a fight that they wish to take up? You know, the NFLPA has said that they believe that all sides were heard. They respect this process. But frankly, the NFL can do whatever it wants. It is empowered by a CBA that was passed by the players who are unionized. So we are all waiting to see here in the next day, 2, or up to 3 days whether an appeal will take place.
All right, so I know that the Browns would have loved to have seen no games, as you alluded to, but how disappointed, or maybe how are they viewing the 6-game scenario, you think, from a team perspective in the facility in the building this morning?
Well, I know that the Browns were anticipating certainly that a suspension very, very likely would take place. Again, their actions speak loudly to that by structuring the contract the way that they did. If they weren't expecting anything, they would have structured this contract in a much more normal way, right? And so, in talking with folks in that building, really anything close to a half season was a win for the Browns, especially when you consider how the wins have changed over the past, let's call it 6 weeks. There was a time I remember very vividly where folks around the league thought that Deshaun Watson was for sure going to be suspended for a year. And then there was a time where it was really a week later that it turned into, okay, it'll be 4 games. And really the last couple of weeks, the wins around the NFL have sort of settled on this 6 to 8 games. And so here we are with 6 games. The Cleveland Browns have been prepared to move forward with Jacoby Brissett. They obviously needed to bolster their quarterback group. And so they got Josh Rosen to compete with Josh Dobbs there as the number 3 quarterback, if you want to call it that. Really number 2 quarterback for the start of the season, since Deshaun Watson will not be there. And the Browns believe enough in Jacoby Brissett, and he just needs to go out there and not lose them games through the first 6 games, if that's what it is, of the season until Deshaun Watson can come back. But Tommy, I'll tell you this. One of the interesting things is now Kevin Stefanski and the Browns, they say they have a plan. How many first-team reps are you going to give Jacoby Brissett, knowing that he's going to lead this team through the first 6 games at least of the season, versus how do you try to get Deshaun Watson ready? Because once you enter week 1 of preparation for the NFL season, Deshaun Watson's not out there on the field, but you want him to be able to hit the ground running week 7 when he returns. You want him to have chemistry with his receivers and tight ends and all that. So that's something that Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, is going to have to figure out very quickly on how best to situate this team moving forward.
JJ, I got one more before I let you go, and it is something that's talked about and circulating on social media right now, and it gets back to our point of sort of this is the new way things are going to be done when it comes to issues like Deshaun Watson and issues like a Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley for gambling, everyone's saying he's getting a year. Deshaun Watson here getting 6 games. What are you anticipating the process will be like, or at least, again, something you're looking out for and how this whole thing will play out in the future?
Yeah, the league office is very aware of the disparity here, right? That you bet a few games, an 11-game parlay on your phone while you're, not playing football, and you get a year-long suspension. That's just something that we around professional sports have known as a no-no. But it's very clear that you have very serious accusations of sexual misconduct from 24 women. 23 of the 24 have now settled with Deshaun Watson, versus placing a couple parlay bets on your phone. And so one gets 6 games, the other gets at least 1 season. I understand that. I don't have a good response to that. And frankly, if you were to pose that to someone who is employed by the NFL, I'm not entirely sure that they have a great response to that, one that would really make a ton of sense to the average person. However, Deshaun Watson, it should be said, was grand juried twice, was never charged with any crime despite these allegations, very serious allegations. These have been settled, 23 of 24 in the civil courts. And so there is that, Tommy. I can understand why people would ask that question, and I frankly have no good response to it.
Yeah, but we'll just look at how it all plays out. And as you mentioned, 23 of the 24, with 3 of those 4 happening just before this news came down. Our thanks to our insider, Jonathan Jones, again with the very latest on the situation surrounding Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Again, 6 games is the information that we have now, with the option for the league to appeal within 3 days. The schedule looks like this. First game back for Deshaun Watson, if all things hold, would be at the Ravens in Week 7. You also have a game in Houston against the Texans in Week 13.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.